So that means, sister girl, you kind of by yourself today. Hey you all, welcome back to my channel. I am coming at you today with a new video. Today's video is going to be about what it's like working as a new graduate nurse. This is going to be a 3-month update. Technically, I'm past the 3-month mark. I do apologize for the background noise you hear, but I mean, I'm going to try to make this video and see how it sounds, and if not, we'll just delete it and start over again. If you're new to my channel, my name is Muriel, and if you're returning, thank you so much for coming back. I am going to give you the pros and cons of how I feel working as a new graduate nurse on a med-surg floor. We'll do the cons first, and then we'll do the pros last, just so we end this video on a good note. Without further ado, let's get right into this video. The first con that I have is the orientation process for a new graduate nurse. When I interviewed, the manager was like, hey, so orientation is typically 8 to 12 weeks for new graduate nurses. Depending on the nurse, everybody is different. I just assumed in my head that I will have 8 full weeks with my preceptor, but that's not how it works. Day 2, working with my preceptor, I had 2 patients, and from there on out, I had anywhere from 3, 4 to 5 patients. On the 6th week of my orientation process, I no longer was working with my preceptor. I came in and I had 3 patients by myself, and my preceptor had her own team. So that means, sister girl, you kind of by yourself today. The 7th week I had 4 patients, and on the 8th week I had a full team by myself. So honey, I had to get it together quickly. I know that the clinical leaders, they want us to develop autonomy very quickly, but sis,
that was like too fast. I'm a new nurse, a brand new nurse.
I felt like that was a bit too much. But without them pushing me, I don't think I would be where I am. They saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. So I'm so grateful that they saw it, but for me, that was a lot of anxiety, stress, pressure that I was carrying home with me every day. If I had to give feedback, I would say for new graduate nurses, I think it could be a little longer than 5-6 weeks with working with their preceptor. I don't know, 10 years from now, I may look back at this video and feel that I had a sufficient amount of time to grow and progress into working alone as a registered nurse. But right now, how I was feeling, I felt that I should have been allowed a little bit more time to develop the confidence and the courage and the skills that I need to effectively take care of 5 patients alone without a preceptor, if you know what I mean. The next con that I have is the charting.
The charting is a lot. And I mean a lot.
The charting, assessing, doing the fall and braiding score, if your patient is on restraints, and if they're on Q4 neuro checks, on top of med pass, all of the other stuff that you're doing.
The charting is ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
When your patient is going off the floor, when your patient came back, if an IV was removed, if the patient needs oxygen, all that has to be documented.
I'm sure a year or 2 from now, I will probably feel different, but right now, charting is a con. The third thing that is a con is the 5-to-1 ratio that I mentioned earlier. It is a lot for nurses to do for 5 patients, and on top of that, get a bathroom break, let alone a water break. It does keep me busy, and it does help my day go by faster, but the ratio is real. The pros of working on a med-surg floor as a new graduate nurse is having a charge nurse. The charge nurses are so underrated. They are amazing. They know how to do everything.
And I mean everything.
And I feel like they do it with their eyes closed. I'm like, 2 of my patients lost their IV access, and then I'll come back 4 minutes later and both of them got IVs. And I'm like, who you
work for? You work for Jesus?
Like, how you did that? Like, how? The charge nurses are amazing. I remember one time calling my first SWAT. I was in there looking like a deer in a headlight. But honey, that charge nurse knew everything about my patient that I didn't get in report. I'm like, he's in there answering the questions, helping me try to get my patient stabilized or possibly transfer off the unit. Like, he was doing it so effortlessly. And I'm like, how y'all do that? And sometimes charge nurses have their own team. It's just amazing. So I know there are charge nurses everywhere, but that's just one of the biggest pros that I have of working on the Med-Surg floor. The second pro I would say of working on the Med-Surg floor is the mixture of nurses. You have your senior nurses and you have your new nurses, and then you have some nurses who have been nurses for like 3 to 5 years. The senior nurses, they do round on us and just see how we're doing, and you know, they give us pep talks and try to encourage us and motivate us. And then you have the new nurses who we confide in each other, like, hey, what's frustrating you and what are you doing different? And then you have the middle nurses who are, I had this one girl the other day, she was like, girl, I see you on time today, you getting your med pass done, you doing good. And that just makes me feel good, just hearing that positive feedback from my peers. That really makes me feel good. The mixture of staff, it's like not everybody is old, not everybody is young. It's a variety, and it's awesome working with that type of mixture of nurses. The third thing that I would say is a pro is communicating with the doctors. I know you've heard different, that it's so much harder to communicate with doctors on the Med-Surg floor. I think the hospitals are trying to improve the communication with the nurses and doctors on the Med-Surg floor. So I don't really think it's a problem with me communicating with the doctors where I work at. They're not on the floor, they're not right outside the patient's room, but they do make their rounds and they do include me in the patient's care. They look at me and they're like, okay, so what do you need from us? What concerns do you have about this patient? The organization that I work with created this software that is incorporated into the patient's chart, and it's called Secure Chat. You can pull up the patient and then it lists all the doctors involved in the patient's care, and you can add or remove people that you want to remove from when you start communicating with the patient. And it almost appears like iPhone. So the other day I texted this doctor and I was like, hey, family is at bedside, they do have some questions, and patient is having this complication. Are you available to come to the bedside? I looked up and the doctor was right at the bedside. He was literally down the hall. It doesn't happen like that all the time, but if they can come to the bedside, they'll come to the bedside, and if not, I always put in my phone number and they call me back. Our organization is making it where it's attainable to reach and get in touch with the doctors. Those are my 6 pros and cons of working on a Med-Surg floor as a new graduate nurse. This is my 3-month update.
These things that frustrate me now may be pros later, and my pros now may be cons later. Who knows? I don't know.
There's a lot more pros and cons that I have, but I wanted to make this video really short and simple. Most important thing I will tell you if you are a new graduate nurse is remember why you decided to be a nurse. I think it will help you and encourage you and motivate you to keep doing it and keep getting up and getting the strength to make it through another day. What I will say, it does get easier with time, and practice makes perfect. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Remember, love costs nothing, smiles are free, and a hug can save someone's life. So be encouraged.